I was living near Sacramento in Northern California at the time, and there was a record store called Imagine Music, and it was a really cool record store. And after shopping there for a while, they knew exactly what I wanted. I'd go in there on a Wednesday or a Thursday after that week's shipment had come in. I'd have a pile so big, and go through those. I think I was probably buying $150, $200 worth of vinyl every week. And yeah, look, it's such an addiction, vinyl addict. And yeah, over the course of that, about first 10 years of my DJing, before I was forced to get into digital DJing. I amassed about 3,500 records.
Welcome to Steel Success, interviews with felons of flourishing about how they stole thriving lives from the authorities of conformity, comfort and fear. I'm Rob Farker, your host, and in each chat I'll find out how my guest made the bold moves that most people avoid, so that the rest of us can break out of our comfort zones, grift the rules of polite society, and think a little more criminal. Let's get stuck in. Welcome folks, it's Rob, your host here with one or two, hopefully just the one, but we will see how we go with the end of the editing process, things that I want to mention before we get stuck in. Now, one of the first things you will probably notice as my chat with DJ Barbuto commences is that I make mention of something called Sydney After Sunset. When I decided to give podcasting another crack, I went through a couple of ideas for what the show was going to be about, and because I wanted to build myself a social life, which pretty much seemed to involve getting into the Sydney nightlife scene, I decided initially to make my podcast concept around that. But as I went along, I didn't feel like it had a strong enough core to it, something that would keep carrying me through, so I decided to change to the Steel Success concept. By that time I'd gotten this chat and another one in the can, and I decided that they were still close enough to the overall concept of what I was trying to get at with Steel Success that what the heck, let's keep it in and give it a go anyway. The other thing is, despite everything seeming to go fine during the initial recording, I discovered during the editing process that around about 2/3 in, the video side of Barbuto's chat with me seems to vanish. We get black screen and it's audio only. So I've done what I can to fix that up, and I still think that there is a heap of good stuff in what Barbuto and I discuss that I've kept the chat in. Hopefully, due perhaps to refreshing my interface with my podcast editing online suite that I am using, maybe this turns out to be on a non-issue, but if it does, my apologies in advance, and I've done the best I can to hopefully have something on the screen during Barbuto's side of the chat. But anyway, let's get stuck in. DJ Christian Barbuto, thank you very much for your time. And I should have probably checked before the chat started. How do we pronounce your last name properly? Is it Barbuto or something else?
Yeah. First time around, you got it, Barbuto. Yeah, I guess if that was the Italian, maybe preserving some of the Italian pronunciation.
So, you got a bit of Italian blood in you from the sounds of things then?
Yeah, on my dad's side.
I've got a little bit on my mum's side, Sicilian though. But I'll tell you what, to kick this off, tell me a little bit about your ideal night out on the town. Where would you be? Where would you be going? What venue would you be attending? And what would you be doing there?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, if we're going to kind of be talking about modern times, these days it's probably going to be more of a, good place to eat and probably a comedy show or something, to be honest, because I'm been doing the nightclub thing for nearly 30 years, so I'm not really going out to these things too much anymore, maybe to a day party or something like that. But, look, I've got a big one coming up this Saturday. I think sometimes now I'll make a night, if I'm booked to play something cool, Like this Saturday, I'm playing with Matt Sassari from France at Aura. I'll probably sculpt a night around that, with a bit of dinner and meeting up with some friends, and then go to the club and play the gig, but at the same time, make something out of the night.
Well, you did say something interesting then, that you would still go to the club and play the gig, so you don't really see yourself as a spectator. You would, even in your ideal night, you'd be the one providing the entertainment?
That would be ideal, like, I mean, I think that's where I still have the most passion in all of this, is doing the craft, like getting up there and mixing some tunes together, and curating a set, and the mechanics of DJing. That's what I'm just still most passionate about. And after 30 years, I'm less passionate in going out and staying up all night and then struggling with a hangover in the morning. That's become a lot less appealing. I've always enjoyed DJing. Like, I love to DJ. I DJ every day, because I teach DJing. So, I teach it, then I go play it, and that's what I like to do the most.
Well, look, I have to continue this with a bit of a hot take, specifically around DJing. So, what do you say to the folks who look at DJing and go, all you're doing is playing somebody else's tunes? How's that being a musician?
Yeah, look, honestly, I haven't have had that, through the years, but I haven't had that for a long time. It's been a long time since I've been around that. I think that it's really evolved so much. DJs are now, like, the main acts, the main artists of the world are, the big DJs. And so I think that's caused a shift in mentality, with regular people, who may have made those claims a decade ago. You're not getting them as much anymore.
So, take me through a little bit of it. How does a DJ actually make music? I mean, I've been onto your Instagram, Spotify profile, and had a listen to some of your songs. This Is Acid kind of carved out a little bit of a chunk of my brain there. I did like that one. So, yeah,
Cool,
what is
thanks,
involved
man.
in you create? You're welcome. So, what's involved in you creating music with a deck and a pair of turntables?
So these days, like, as far as actually making tunes, like constructing a tune, I try to do a little bit each day. It's definitely a discipline. I'm a DJ who plays the music, and I'm motivated to make my own music to DJ it. I'm not a producer who produces and then got into DJing. I was a DJ first. So, the reward of making music is always, playing it and gigging it at the end of it, not the other way around. So, for me, the creative process starts with really just motivation, getting the motivation to sit down. I know in order to get a polished, top 100 type track, out to come out of the studio, it's 20 hours. It's 20 hours of work, roughly. So there's a half a week of a full-time job to get that done. So it really starts with being motivated and disciplined to sit down at the desk, turn it all on, and start with nothing, silence, and then go from there. So, but for me to do it, and I know a lot of people do it this way, I typically will start with a reference track. I'll usually work with a track that's not mine, that I'm motivated by, that I'm inspired by, and I'll put it into my computer so I can see the landscape of it, something to follow along, bit of a groove to follow along. A lot of people will criticize that that's copying, but look, it's not copying. You can't copy the sound design of another artist, but you can copy the flow. You can copy the feeling, the intensity, and so I'll use a reference track to sculpt out a bit of a groove. Once the groove is going, once we've got some substance in there, and we've got a bit of a introduction, we've got a bit of a chorus going, and we've got a bit of a theme. At that point, I can scrap the reference track. I'll typically just delete it because now I've got a bit of a song structure. And at that point, once I've got the song structure and I play it, I'll simply either hear on I'll hear what is in my head while I'm listening, what's supposed to be there, and then I'll take that in my head and I'll somehow figure out how do I fill that, how do I get that into the track, either by making a noise. It could be a bit of synth, um, or by sampling it. I can get the sample from either a sample pack, or I'll rip it from an old track of mine, or just anywhere really, and just start kind of patching away at it. But my production process is really simple. I don't do lots of noise. I don't do lots of channels. I just get the job done and really focus on having high grade sound quality.
As one must when one is producing music, absolutely. I've got to take things back a little bit because you've mentioned in your biography that you are Sydney born and raised, and yet you found your discovery of electronic music in Europe. So, how did you find yourself in Europe?
Yeah, mate. Look, so I was when I was in, just a Aussie kid, teenager, I was really into push bikes. Push bikes was my thing. I raced BMX. I started racing BMX bikes when I was about 9. And then by the time I was 15, I was on the New South Wales state um, uh, racing team, for road racing, Tour de France type stuff, road bikes. And that progressed to, by the time I was about 18, I was 18. I was racing on the track, the velodrome, and I got an offer to DJ to race bicycles in Europe. So I was racing bikes over there for about 5 years. Um, and my teammates, I rode for a Dutch bike racing team, and all my teammates were into techno. That's all you could hear in the team bus. Techno, techno. And I didn't even, I was a bit of a metal kid. I was more like AC/DC, Offspring, Nirvana, Green Day, bit Metallica, radio rock type stuff. You
That's
know,
my teenage years right there too.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. That was my thing. And then these guys, they forced me to listen to techno, and that turned into going to in the off season. We went to nightclubs. We went to some nightclubs, and I think we went to some in Germany. Went to some in Amsterdam. Then I went in. God, this is way back in 1996, mate. Went to the United States. Went to America. I went to America for a bike training camp. Right, I was supposed to. I had a pro contract. I had a professional bike contract the next year, in 1997. Back at a bigger team to race in Holland, and while I was in America, I started going to, the raves, and just to explore them. People I knew were going, so I went. And look, I very quickly quit racing bikes, and I'm like, I want to do the DJing. I really liked whatever the technical side of it that they were doing, whatever they were doing with the turntables, which I had no clue what they were doing. I just liked it, and I just knew I wanted to do it, and that's how it started.
Oh, wow. So, if it hadn't been for those rotten Dutch brainwashing you, you could have been a BMX riding frontman of a pub rock band
Yeah,
instead.
maybe. Yeah, yeah.
Well, one thing you do describe that time in the late 90s, you call it the rave golden era. What made that time so awesome for the rave scene?
Probably less laws. I think there's probably less laws. Some of these things had 30,000 people every weekend.
Wow. And
I was hanging out in Northern California, kind of in the San Francisco sort of area, and every single weekend they had massive raves with 30,000 people.
where I have
There
to
was no
interrupt
fuss.
quickly. Yeah, I have to interrupt quickly. So 30,000 people in a rave. I assume we're not talking a regular stadium here. What sort of venues were getting filled up by all these people?
So the really popular one that I used to go to, well, firstly they'd have them at the fairgrounds. I mean, they'd literally
Ah,
have them at the state fairgrounds. They would have them. I went to one at like the professional basketball stadium.
yeah.
They had them at the. There was one particular place in Oakland, and it was called the International Trade Center, where I think just lots of shipping, like shipping yards, and God knows
Ah.
how these promoters would do this, but they would somehow manage to rent these places. And they look like airplane hangars. They're big enough to put four jumbo jets in these things.
Yeah.
And yeah, look, and they'd go all night. So it was cool. That was a cool time.
Bloody heck. So, when you were getting into the golden era of the rave scene and going to all these places, did you find there any particular styles of techno that you were drawn to more than others?
Oh, nah, look, at the time it was whatever was on. I liked it all. There'd be a bit of drum and bass. I think I was always drawn more to techno. I think techno I'd always like really gravitate to that. But I'd cruise around and listen to all the music, and it was all good. Those the trance and the drum and bass and house, and they'd even have like some hip hop stages with the incredible turntablists doing the scratching and stuff like that. It was all vinyl. It was all vinyl. This was way before digital. So yeah, it was cool.
Indeed. So, how did you get into that scene as a DJ yourself?
I think I bought well, there was record stores. There was old school proper curated record stores, and I bought two Techniques, brand new Techniques, 1200 turntables, brand new out of the box. I think they were $299 each at the time, US, so about 500 Australian dollars, brand new turntables. Bought them from some music store. Got a cheap little Vestax mixer, and there was a record store. I was living near Sacramento in Northern California at the time, and there was a record store called Imagine Music, and it was a really cool record store. And after shopping there for a while, they knew exactly what I wanted. I'd go in there on a Wednesday or a Thursday after that week's shipment had come in. I'd have a pile, a pile so big, and go through those. I think I was probably buying $150, $200 worth of vinyl every week. And yeah, look, it's such an addiction, vinyl addict. And yeah, over the course of that, about first 10 years of my DJing, before I was forced to get into digital DJing. I amassed about 3,500 records. So yeah, that was the best. That was for me the best time of DJing was when it was vinyl.
How much of that vinyl have you still got?
Oh, look, it's at a mate's house. The whole collection is at a mate's house who I'm in touch with. It's in Texas. I took it to Texas when I moved to Texas, and yeah, it's at my mate's house. So it's somewhere. It's it's somewhere.
Somewhere lost in the States. Uh,
Yeah.
so, in this meantime, how were you supporting yourself so that you could drop $150 a week on all the
I
new
was a
vinyl?
car salesman.
Oh, right.
I was a car salesman. Yeah, I was a car salesman. I had, because remember I mentioned earlier in this chat, I was a cyclist, right? So I was really, I knew about at the time quite a bit about health and fitness. And I was doing some personal training and some gym introduction stuff at a local gym just for a few bucks. And one of the clients was the general manager of a car dealership. Said, you'd be a really good car salesman. You should come and do this. I was young. I was 22 or something, 21, 22. Well, let's go. I want to do that. That sounds cool. Look, yeah, look, as a, I don't know if people know, but in America, you make a ton of money selling cars. So I made it for the 22-year-old. I was making a ton of money. And so, yeah, so that's what fed the addiction. Yeah, it was cool.
Can you tell me a little bit then about that big jump moment when you went, stuff it, I'm sick of selling cars, I'm going to go all in on being a DJ?
Yeah, yeah. So I was selling Porsche, right? The greatest car. Selling Porsche. I was passionate about these cars. Selling Porsche. And in 2008, there was an extraordinary financial crash that impacted that market, especially in the California market, drastically. It lasted about 12 months, and that was a catalyst to where my business, my car selling, just came to a grinding halt. I run out of money. I wasn't making any money. You know, in America, it's 100% commission. You don't get a salary. You get 100% commission. It's
Yeah.
all commission. So run out of money. And the mate of mine who has my vinyl in Texas right now, he had moved to Texas. I was in California. He said, come here and do some stuff, DJs, start some events, do some events. Austin, this was in Austin, Texas. He said the town's blowing up. So I didn't have a choice. I really didn't have a choice. So he flew. Eric Sandy's his name. He flew, picked me up. We got a moving truck, dumped all my stuff in the moving truck, and moved to Texas. And I haven't had an employer since then. That was in April of 2009.
So that's crikey, that's 17 years you've
Yeah,
basically been a
full-time
solo
DJ.
operator as a
Yeah,
DJ.
I've survived. I've survived off DJing at some level for 17 years.
And the next thing I have to ask you about logically is that moment when you left the States and went international through your DJing. So what was that next big step? What was that like?
So that was before social media. Social media was definitely there, but it didn't have the weight that it has today. Back then, in that time frame, I think I caught the last couple of years of, where a DJ gets booked based upon, the music that you do.
Yeah.
So I got signed to this label, Octopus. It was like the third, like ranked the third biggest techno label in the world at the time. Then I got signed to Tronic, which was the second ranked techno label. Drum Code was number one. I wasn't able to get on Drum Code at that time. I still haven't gotten on Drum Code. I'd like to. But having that clout of being an Octopus Tronic DJ, that was what kind of gave you the backbone to get in national bookings around America in different cities, as well as I did some parties in Central America, lots of parties in Central America, Canada, over in Europe, Germany, Netherlands, Malta, Australia, New Zealand, but mostly around North America.
So, accepting, of course, Sydney, what were some of, and I hate to ask you to play favourites on a public medium such as this, but what were some of the favourite places you got to go to and play at?
Look, I reckon you look at it's hard to say favorite, because they're all so good. Like what I'd mentioned to you before, like how do you even compare that? You've got like Amsterdam, and you do a gig in Amsterdam in July when the sun's shining and you've got 18 hours of daylight, and it's such a great city to be in. Massive nightclub. I played, I think, 2 or 3 times Techno Tuesday in Amsterdam, which is like a 3,000 people go on a Tuesday. Then, like the next day, I was playing at the coolest little nightclub in Malta. You got water and the amazing food all around you in this cool nightclub. Uh, but then I think about the gigs that I've done in, like, say, Vancouver or Toronto. Where the crowd really knows the music and they really know what you're doing. So there's look, they're all favorite, you know. I mean, I could probably find some ones that were flops that were pretty bad, but that might be more interesting. But yeah, look, I want to say they're all favorites. They're all good.
You mentioned that a lot of folks in the DJ scene tend to start as producers and become DJs, but you had the opposite path. When did you start producing other people's work, and what are
Yeah,
the
look,
challenges?
yeah, so I started. I mean, I started it. I got production software in 2007. I started to focus on it in 2012, though. Like that 2007 to 2012, I didn't do much with it. I mean, I tampered with it, but didn't really focus on it. I started to focus on it most in 2012, and then right at to around 2015 is when the music started to become something that people might buy and play. It was look, I mean, it took a long time. It took a few years to get it going.
What are the challenges of bringing the best out of other performers' sounds as opposed to composing your own stuff?
Like when remixing or collaborating, I don't think it changes the process as much, other than you sort of, if you do that, you're forced to work with the that person's sounds. Whether you and maybe you like it, sometimes you listen and you like it in the beginning, but then you can't work with it. And so you got to try to find ways to work with it. And look, I struggle with that sometimes. And I haven't done a collaboration for a long time, and I run my own label, Mavic Music. So most of my time is usually spent listening and advising, but I'm not doing a lot of work on other people's music anymore, and it's not my favorite thing to do.
No worries. So you found your strength, you found your lane, and you are sticking with it, making your
Yeah, yeah,
focusing on your own stuff.
yeah. I like doing my own music at the moment.
Now, what was the year when you had an attack of sanity? Mine was around about 2022, 2023, and you finally came back to Sydney.
So came back to Sydney in 2020, December of 2020, late December of 2020. So call it 21, and that was at the very tail end of COVID. So basically, things were pretty much full steam ahead. 2018, 2019. Was really busy doing a lot of DJing around North America, lots of local type stuff in Austin, Texas, where I was living. Then, the COVID event hit. That really shifted like everything, that changed everything. And that sort of became the motivation to come back to Australia. Like now's a good time to come back to Australia. I don't think I really in my bottom of my heart knew I was going to stay in America forever. I wanted to come and live in Australia at some point. I'd been coming here to play every year. I'd come here to play. I started coming here to DJ in like I think 2015. So I had been coming here to DJ for 5 years, and just knew I wanted to basically live here. Not so much the motivation to live here as a DJ, but just to live here. I just wanted to like come back and live in Australia. Australia, whether people agree with this or not, having lived in America, and look, America's cool. Austin, Texas is very cool. Australia is a much nicer place to live. Like Australia is probably one of the top two, three places to live anywhere in the world. It's
Yeah.
pretty polished. As much as people whine and complain about it, it's pretty bloody nice. So it's just a nicer place to be.
No, no argument from me there. I left Sydney in 2005, spent 18 years in Cairns, and thankfully have been able to make it back here in the last couple of years. But I know what you mean, especially about this town. So, but I'm the host. I can't gush too much about what's awesome about Sydney. So, please, Christian, tell me what you love about. I mean, heck, in your interview, I did some research for the website concerty.com back in 2022. I quote you here: I love Sydney, the people, the culture. While the scene here is different, I am having a great time and we are making things happen. So tell us a bit more about what's awesome about this wonderful town that we both happen to live in.
I'm doing I'm doing a lot of DJ work here. My my passion, which is more of a peak time underground techno sort of a sound, it's not thriving. It doesn't thrive here. It exists, but it's an uphill. It's pushing the cart uphill. Um, I do a lot of DJing, not as my brand, not as the Barbuto brand, but I play a lot of house music. I play a lot of disco, and I do a lot of like more mainstream club work. I'll do that every single week, 2 or 3 nights a week. I'll do that, and I enjoy it because, like I said earlier, I really, really enjoy the mechanics of DJing and the mechanics of mixing and nailing a good mix. Putting the music aside, I like to nail a good mix. So there's a ton of that DJ work to be done, which is an absolute blessing. Different to America, there's less of that. There's not as much hospitality DJing. I was doing a ton of techno DJing, but I wasn't really doing much. I was DJing some weddings on the side, and that sort of mainstream experience I've carried over to DJing in Sydney. So my passion for Sydney is, yes, cool DJing. There are some good parties. Clubs are getting better. Sydney and Australia, they definitely need to work on their sound systems. We don't have good sound systems here in comparison to Europe and America, quality wise. But the real allure is just really like kind of what I said in that last interview, more just the culture. It's pretty safe. It's generally a safe place. I know we've had some mishaps recently, but in comparison, you walk through Sydney, one edge of it to the other at 2 o'clock in the morning, and nothing's probably going to happen. Now, in parts of America where I've been, and other places in the world, that's not the case. You can't walk from one side of the city to the other at 2 o'clock in the morning. You may not make it through. That's probably one of my most appreciated parts of living in Sydney, is it's safe and clean and tidy for the most part.
Certainly is. One thing that I seem to have tapped into talking to a few people and starting to do some man on the street work, which has been a bit fun of recent. Some folks tend to think that the Sydney social scene and the Sydney party scene is struggling. There seems to be a certain amount of pessimism about it. What's your perspective on that? And are things better than people tend to think they are?
Yeah, I think they are. Look, I mean, if you're a punter, if you want to dance to some really good music and you're flexible, like you're not like into one specific micro genre, but you just like to have a good time. You want to go to a good party. You want to hear some good DJs. Look, there's tons of it. There's tons of it. I think I did a little party a couple months ago in Newtown. I just booked out the bottom of the Marley Hotel at Tokyo Sing Song. Have a DJ session with some mates, and we had free admission. We had 100 people come through. It was cool. But that weekend there were 55 on Resident Advisor. There were 55 events with DJs playing underground music. That doesn't include all the mainstream clubs and all the mainstream DJs. That's like, the kind of the advertised underground music at some genre. There were 55 of them.
Wow.
I mean, you can't go to 55 parties, in 2 nights. So,
Hell no.
yeah, look, when you see that griping about there's not much going on, that's not accurate. There's a ton of stuff to do. And if you want to go to a party on a Sunday morning at like 6 a.m., there's parties that go all through Saturday night, all through Sunday morning. There's several of them. They're out there. You just got to look. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool.
I do. People tend to talk about the lockout laws and the fact that everything seems to close up at about 3 a.m., at least at the major venues, a lot of nights. But yeah, it's nice to know that there are still things kicking on.
Yeah, they're kicking on. And look, I rarely make it to 3 a.m. these days anyway, so I'm not going to complain about it.
Yeah, fair enough, like you were saying earlier on. So let's talk a little bit about the future, what's coming up. What have you found that has taken you most by surprise or engaged your curiosity recently?
I reckon so. One of my main focuses is my DJ school. I'm 50% of a DJ school with another popular Sydney artist, Jatine.
And that's
And
the On Cue DJ
yeah,
school.
on cue. So look, we're super busy. Like, I mean, we're as busy as we want it to be, and we're negotiating with ourselves. Do we want it to be more busy? Do we want to take on more? So, uh, I'm surprised at how many people want one-on-one DJ lessons and DJ mentorship. So that's cool. That's, to me, is surprising how busy that is. And I mean, I did 3 lessons today. I've got 3 lessons tomorrow. We are now moving into the realms of doing brand activations and corporate team building
Right.
with DJing. So mixed into that. So yeah, that's pretty surprising. That's to me really surprising. We have a booking coming up. We have a brand activation coming up with a makeup company, and they're going to be bringing through their staff, their influencers. We're going to be doing 6 1-hour crash course. Here's how you DJ in 60 minutes, sort of things, to their social media influencers. And it's going to be a local art gallery, and it's going to be all dressed up. And that's I think that's fun.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. Well, beyond that, where do you see the personal future of Christian Barbuto, whether as, not just as a DJ, but as a curious, enthusiastic person in general? Where would you like to go next?
Yeah, cool. So I'm back into uh I'm back in shape, right? So I was out of shape for a long time. I wasn't unhealthy, but I was not in shape. So I'm back in shape now. So I'm exercising at a pretty high level, about 5 or 6 days per week. I'm in the gym. I ride my bike. I do big long hikes. 2, 3, 4, 5 hour hikes and walks and jogs. So that's a big part of it. Having a good diet, maybe doing a bit of travel. Doing some travel. My wife and I are going to go to Italy this year. We're going to go to Malaysia. And this is not to DJ. This is to look around. Working to school. I've got tracks coming out. I've got lots of unreleased music that's coming out this year. I've got artists on my label who are incredible. I've got incredibly talented artists who I'm helping to hopefully break through into the scene through their original productions on my label. So that's a big part of it. And but more than anything, just kind of writing. In a way, I'm not pushing the way that a young to like if I was 21, I'd have different goals. I made a wake. And now I'm riding that wake. So I'm just kind of cruising along, and more than anything, just kind of sort of enjoying things.
Sounds good. Well, after having listened to this chat, or watched it, as the case may be, where can people go to find out more about Christian Barbuto and DJ Barbuto and the OnQ DJ School?
Yeah, cool. Look, I reckon probably, and as much as I'm not a huge social media enthusiast, I put what I can effort wise into my Instagram, and the almighty link in bio. Just find me
Of
on
course.
Instagram, barbuto.official. Hit the almighty link in bio, and it's all there.
Absolutely. Well, Christian, thank you once again very much for your time. It has been a pleasure chatting with you for Sydney After Sunset.
Rob, thanks, mate. Like it has, it's lovely. I can't wait to listen back and give it a share.